Kara Oostros here with RealAgriculture.com. We are at Farm Tech Day 2 here in Edmonton, Alberta, and I'm sitting in a very full Real Ag lounge here today with Scott Keller, who's a farmer near New Norway, Alberta. How's it going today?
Very good. Yourself?
Great. So today we're talking a bit about grain drying based on a presentation you actually gave earlier to also a very packed room.
Yeah.
It seems to be a hot topic, I mean, especially after 2019 and what a lot of producers faced in the area.
Yeah.
So what was your number one take-home, I guess, from the presentation?
Well, like you said, so the room was packed, and that's indicative of the harvest we've gone through, 4 or 5 bad ones in a row. A lot of people call this the harvest from hell, but there's been some of us have been dealing with it for 4, 5, 6 years now. This bad weather where we've been drying almost every bushel that we take off every year. So I was asked to do this presentation about the economics of drying grain, and we set up our dryer in 1995, and it was on natural gas or on grid power, and based on some Twitter conversations with some other farmers, it seemed that guys with propane were paying more money to dry their grain, and I didn't fully understand their costs. So you only share so much information with each other.
Yeah.
And so when I was asked to do this talk and look at the economics, well, sure, I can figure out my economics. I can present that, but what are other guys paying? So I had to do a little research to find out what the differences were, and came up with some conversions, figuring the economics out, and talked with Pammy to confirm my numbers so I wasn't talking out of my backside, right?
Yeah.
To make it usable. So the numbers we came up with based on the average natural gas price we're paying on the farm during grain drying season, September to December, versus what that conversion would be in the exact same dollars to dry for propane, we were coming up with your propane price would have to be somewhere around 11 cents on average the last 4 years. Yeah. So we had our cheapest natural gas price just in September here at $2.95 a gigajoule. Well, that works out to like 7 cents a liter.
Yep.
For propane, and the most expensive was the year before when there was some carbon tax on it, and that was like 14 cents a liter. Well, survey a few guys, talk to some guys on Twitter, find out, well, no, we're paying 40, 45, 50 cents a liter for propane. That's delivered in, all costs, GST, delivery fee, carbon tax, if it's applicable or not. So it's like, well, that's massive. We're talking on average 4 times the amount of money just for your choice of fuel, whether you're using natural gas or propane, right? So that was a big eye-opener for me, because before I just thought, well, it's more expensive, but maybe it's only 25% more expensive. And then really, who cares if it costs you an extra half a cent? But when we're drying grain and it's costing us 4.8 cents a bushel for the utilities, for the power and for the natural gas, and these guys are paying quadruple that for their fuel, they might be paying 15 cents to dry that same grain.
Yeah.
So it's a massive difference, and it was an eye-opener for me. And there was definitely, when I presented that, the crowd, I was surprised. You said, show of hands, who's got a grain dryer, who has a grain dryer on propane, and then who doesn't have a grain dryer. And seemed like the whole room was full of guys with grain dryers, and a lot of them running on propane. And when I talked to, I saw a lot of guys stirring around in their seats when I did the comparison. Like, they all knew what their price of propane was.
Yeah.
But they weren't paying 11 cents, which would be the comparable to natural gas. So I think it was a big eye-opener for those guys as well. So
if somebody's looking to convert to natural gas, how do they even go about that?
Yeah, so it's not so simple. So I have a basic understanding of it. Like the province is divided into gas co-ops, and
yeah.
And some of it is privatized as well, some regions, and the cost of hookup it's such a big gradient on how expensive it is. So in our gas co-op, it's $7,000.
Wow.
And that's dirt cheap.
Yeah.
Some guys are saying it's $100,000 to bring in natural gas. Some of these guys are like, well, we got to bring in a line for 2 miles. Some guys are like, it's $80,000 and it's across the road from me. So these are situations, I think, where it's privatized corporations, and because there's no competition in the area, you can't just hire whatever contractor you want to bring in a gas line. You have to go through your provider, so they can really charge whatever they want. And some of the gas co-ops have the attitude that as long as we're breaking even doing the install, we're selling the natural gas to this guy for the rest of his career, basically, right? So we're gonna break even doing the install. We don't have to make money doing that. Let's make it as affordable as possible. And these gas co-ops, they have boards. There's they have farmers sitting on those boards that set those prices too. So, but then we get into, so if it's 4 times as expensive to do propane versus natural gas, even if it is a $50,000, a $60,000, $100,000 hookup fee, if you're spending $80,000 a year on propane, and that would have only cost you $20,000 if you're on natural gas, that's a $60,000 savings. All of a sudden, that savings, if it's a $100,000 hookup, year 2, you're money ahead. Like, we don't see ROIs like that on the farm. Like, it's a sad thing that it is $100,000 to bring in 1.25 inches or whatever size of hose, plastic hose. Like, surely that hose is not that expensive, but I know there's a lot of other moving parts to why those costs are there, and it's not just the case where people are just taking advantage of the farmers in this situation. It has a lot to do with the planning that happened decades ago when they initially set up that infrastructure. So there's a lot of moving parts there, but I think it's something that we need to look at. You can't just bat an eye at, it's $100,000 to hook it up, and so I'll just keep using propane like I always have. So you need to do that cost calculation, and I showed guys kind of how to do that. So hopefully some of them go home and say, let's phone the gas co-op, let's get it done, so we're done with this propane, right?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously there was a lot of conversation between you and the farmers as well.
Yep.
What were some of the questions that were coming up?
A lot of just some setup issue, setup and why you guys do certain things, and what kind of dryers, what kind of temperatures do you dry at? I wish there was more time for some more Q&A. There just seems to never be enough time with a polarizing topic like that where everybody's like interested in it, but guys wanted to know. And we don't have great answers because there hasn't been any research done on it too. Like something you find these charts where it says, dry your grain at this temperature. If you got barley, this temperature, you have canola. And I asked a commission posted that about a month or so ago, and I asked some questions, and I said, where did they come up with those numbers? Not saying that they're wrong, but just where's the baseline research for that? Because I wanted to learn from it, because I've always been doing it by, we did it this way last year, so we'll keep doing it at that same temperature, not really knowing what we need. Because, things like canola, they catch on fire easily, right? So we have to be cognizant of that. And if you dry wheat too hot, you can wreck your grade. All of a sudden, you throw 2 red wheat in the dryer, and it comes out of 3. Yeah. Well, you just lost 40 cents or 50 cents a bushel. So the answer I got back from the commission was, we don't really know where those numbers came from. And that's kind of a sad thing. Like, we're all using these dryers, and we don't have any research. We don't know, if I put in a new burner, could I be more energy efficient with it? Could I save, even though I'm at 4.8 cents, if I put in a modern burner, because my dryer was basically from the 70s, and it was IBEC did a retrofit with these older Vertec dryers in the mid 90s, and that's what Dad ended up buying, and we have that same dryer on the farm today. But I think I'm fairly cheap ability to dry grain, but could I improve on that? Well, I don't really know where to go from here there never has been that research done on it. And you think about the money that we're literally putting into hot air, is like we should be looking at some of these things.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing what comes in the future. Hopefully we have a year that is a little less needing of the grain drying, but I guess we'll see what comes on. Thanks again for coming on today, Scott. It was great catching up with you.
Yeah, you're welcome.